What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Here we are with another reaction, and here we are with 60 minutes. Why are Chinese warships circling Australia? We had the incident in the air when they shot them flares and almost made the Australian aircraft crash. We had them shoot whatever a weapons test a little bit too close to Australia, we feel like, or they didn't report it or reported it late. And now we got them circling Australia. Like, if this ain't like China, they may need a slap on the hand. They may need a warning. They may need to, hey, a show of force to say, hey, take the warships back. Then take them back to China. We don't like y'all circling us. We know we not rocking with that. But we're gonna jump into this, see what we can see. We'll see what's going on. Before we do, if you guys happen to enjoy, don't forget to subscribe, get the video a thumbs up, and let's see what's happening.
Lurking in waters off Sydney, an unusual sight. 3 Chinese military ships travelling further south than they ever have before.
We are aware of this task group. We are monitoring this task group very closely. It is, as I understand it, operating in international waters.
Australia's Defence Department was watching closely, announcing on February 13 the flotilla was under observation.
Both naval and air force assets have been deployed to make sure that we are monitoring exactly what is occurring here.
For more than a week, the warships quietly made their way down Australia's east coast without incident, until February 21, when their silent sail south ended with a bang. About 9:30 in the morning, the ships let loose, carrying out a live fire exercise in the Tasman Sea, 300 nautical miles off the Australian coast. But despite the Defence Force supposedly monitoring them, Australia had no idea the ships had opened fire. Instead, it was the pilot of a commercial passenger jet who first sounded the alarm.
Exactly.
At 9:58 a.m, the pilot of Virgin Flight 161 from Sydney to Queenstown heard a warning from the warships over the radio about the live fire exercises. The Virgin pilot immediately relayed the information to Aviation Authority Air Services Australia, which issued an alert to all planes in the area.
The only way you knew about this was because a Virgin pilot heard about it.
I just don't think that's right, bro. I think China should have definitely, these military ships, they should have definitely gave Australian defenses a heads up to say, hey, we're about to do live fire. We're about to do a weapons test. We're about to shoot. Like, definitely should have been a heads up. It shouldn't have been no pilot on a Virgin aircraft giving the hey, they're firing. It shouldn't have learned about it that way. I don't like it.
And called in.
Correct.
20 minutes later, an Emirates flight was also warned by the warships, while a Qantas plane flying some minutes behind diverts its path. Dozens of other planes that day also avoid the area.
So you were ahead of Defence on this?
I wouldn't say we were ahead.
It's not a...
We became aware of the situation because
Alarmingly, the Australian Defence Force knew nothing until 30 minutes after the Chinese ships began their live fire exercise,
that ain't
when Air
right.
Services Australia raised the alarm. A failure slammed from all sides.
Is it the case that Defence was only notified via Virgin and Air Services Australia 28 minutes after the firing window commenced?
Yes. The notification was that call that had made from when the firing window opened, and that, in our view, is inadequate notification.
That's not inadequate, it's after it started.
It was extraordinary that the Prime Minister and Defence Minister told us they'd put in place an unprecedented surveillance operation around these 3 warships, and then to have the head of our military, Admiral Johnson, tell the Parliament, under oath I might add, that he didn't know whether live firing had happened on the Friday. It's extraordinary to me to have our military say they're doing unprecedented monitoring, but not be able to know if warships fired their weapons or not. That seems to be the lowest bar of capability we should expect.
Man makes a good point. The man is making a good point. I said, been on record, I don't like it. I feel like China's testing the responses of Australia, and with U.S., I feel like being Australia's biggest military partner, kind of testing to see what the U.S. will step in and do as well. So U.S. being tested in a way, and I don't like it.
Standard international practice is to give 24 to 48 hours notice of any live fire exercise, but China gave Australia and New Zealand none. However, Papua New Guinea was briefed weeks prior.
The fact that China's ambassador to PNG in the South Pacific has their office in Canberra, and yet the Chinese ambassador didn't pick up the phone to make a local call to Foreign Affairs or Defence or the Foreign Minister or the Defence Minister, that tells you it was a willful decision to not give Australia advance warning.
Agreed.
That's a deliberate act.
China says Australia has hyped up its concerns, claiming it issued repeated safety notices well in advance. And while it may have only been a drill, the danger was still very real.
What do you mean you issue safety notices well in advance? Australia obviously didn't get them. Australia obviously didn't get no safety notices, or them planes wouldn't have been flying in that path, and they would have known, to divert these planes.
Chinese were using weapons that had a range up to 50,000 feet in altitude, so that could have placed aircraft at risk.
What we're hearing is how this was all perfectly safe, and the only problem was they didn't give enough advance warning. But there was real danger of a civilian airliner being shot down, because live fire drills can involve not just naval gunfire, but firing high-altitude surface-to-air missiles. So the risk was real. If an airliner had been shot down, it wouldn't have been one death, it would have been everybody on board.
While the government vowed to seek answers,
we do have concerns about the transparency associated with this and the notice, and I certainly will be having a discussion with Foreign Minister Wang about that.
I don't think we have a satisfactory answer from China as to the question of the notice.
The ship's location means China technically broke no rules.
They are in international waters. They are completely within the bounds of international law.
Normally, navies conduct live fire drills on designated training ranges in chunks of water, or in parts of the world's oceans where they aren't putting at risk civilian airliners flying overhead or civilian ships blundering into the area. And normally, navies give advance notice. The Chinese did none of those things.
And it came just days after another alarming incident.
That's what I'm saying. If it was just that incident alone, maybe we can buy it and say, you know what, just a one-off. But the fact that it came after this incident of the flares, come on, that ain't no coincidence.
On February 11,
That
an
ain't no
RAF
coincidence.
Poseidon jet was conducting routine surveillance of the South China Sea when it was challenged by two Chinese J-16 jets. One of them releasing flares just 30 metres away from the Australian plane.
The proximity of the Chinese Air Force plane was so close that there's no way you could have maintained control over those flares.
There were a dozen Air Force personnel on board, but thankfully no one was injured.
Thank God.
There was danger, and had those flares hit the P-8, there was the potential for significant damage to our aircraft.
Had those flares gone into the intake of that Poseidon, we could have lost the aircraft and the crew, about 12 people. So at the one hand, they are undertaking very unprofessional and dangerous and provocative and aggressive activities in the South China Sea. At the same time, they're deploying a very powerful naval task force close to Australia and now conducting live fire exercises. This is all about signalling. This is not just a naval operation per se to train the Chinese Navy. This is about signalling to us China's intent to be the dominant actor in our region.
And completely agree. Completely agree. That is exactly what is happening. That is exactly what is happening. So I feel like a message need to be sent. A message need to be sent.
These close calls considered deliberate and calculated shows of force from an increasingly arrogant Beijing.
They are practicing and rehearsing, and they are collecting.
What do you think they're rehearsing for? Land strike missions against Australian infrastructure and bases. We should be worried about the long-term implications of what's going on.
The federal government believes China not only wants to show its military reach, but normalise its presence in the region. Others think there might be a more sinister intent.
At a pure safety level, we should be concerned. At a strategic level, we should also be concerned, because this exercise, this deployment is not just normal. This is about strategic signalling from Beijing to Canberra, saying to us that China can project its maritime power and its naval capabilities whenever it wants, wherever it wants.
Facts.
It can do whatever it wants.
Facts.
Raising serious questions about Australia's readiness to respond to a military threat.
For about 10 years now, it's been in every government document of both sides of government that Australia's distance and location no longer protects us from military threat.
Dang.
These warships turning up.
From videos I had seen, I would have thought, yeah, that Australia's location did protect them from China. But if that's not the situation, yeah, then some need to have it.
Close to Sydney Harbour, and then taking their time to go around the entire country shows that you don't have to have a long-range ballistic missile to prove the vulnerability of Australia's military bases, of Australia's critical infrastructure, power stations, and of all of our population centres. We have no capacity to protect critical civilian infrastructure like power and water supplies, and no potential to protect any Australian who isn't wearing a uniform. That's now unacceptable. We have a homeland defence problem.
We are worrying about AUKUS, we're worrying about submarines that are coming in 20 years' time, which are an absolute waste of money, and I don't understand why we don't have missiles all up the top and around Australia. So work that one out.
Adding to the uncertainty is the return of Donald Trump and questions over the US commitment to the Indo-Pacific region.
There are experts this morning saying this is a test from China to kind of test the resolve of the Trump administration, to see how assertive they're willing to be in a faraway land that doesn't really affect their domestic politics post their manoeuvring in Ukraine.
Well, we haven't seen Trump turn his mind to our part of the world yet. We already know that Mr. Trump has disdain for allies. He sees that.
I think he got to see. I think you got to send a message to China, bro. Low key, he's not wrong. Like, the disdain for allies is crazy. Like, it feels like the U.S. He's isolating the U.S. from all its allies and basically telling all the allies, like, go freak yourself. Like, telling the allies, we do way more for y'all than y'all do for us. So this relationship will no longer work, and basically telling them to F off, and that's not good for us. It's not good for our allies. Like, we've had the strongest military, I guess, teaming up in the history of the world. Like, the strongest military alliance. I don't know why I couldn't think, in the history of the world between NATO, and it seems like that's going away quickly because Trump's administration is kind of giving a big FU to all the allies, and I don't like that.
Them as free riding on America, and he thinks that in security terms as well as economic terms. The problem for us is America looks less reliable under the Trump administration as an ally, and just as we're seeing with Europe, European nations have to do more for themselves in defence. Well, Australia needs to as well.
The 3 Chinese warships have continued to circumnavigate Australia's shores, with authorities again assuring us they're watching closely. But it likely won't be the last time we see Beijing's forces come so close.
There will be more Chinese Navy warships. They will bring their drones along with them. So we will face more of this. Australia needs to get much better, not just at the military surveillance, but realising that sharing critical information from that military surveillance is essential, and it's got to be done in a timely, urgent way.
The government is now being called on to take more action to protect us from a conflict we hope never comes.
It seems there's a massive gap in our surveillance capability, and there's also a gap in our command and control, and that is a big problem.
The continuing use of very mild and diplomatic rebukes by the Australian government whenever one of these incidents happen is not deterring the Chinese from doing it again and again and again. They will continue to do them because there's no cost, there's no consequences for them, and they value or they respect strength. And we're not showing strength at the moment in terms of our diplomacy or our engagement with China, and so therefore they do what they wish.
Our government and our military know the Chinese are breaking those laws and behaving dangerously every day of the week. It's not just Australia that's feeling it. Countries like Vietnam, Philippines, Taiwan, Japan, the Canadians, they're all facing the same behaviour. What China is trying to do is create a new normal where everyone knows they're dangerous and aggressive, so everybody gives them room.
If we were to be attacked, we're buggered. We're absolutely stuffed.
Nah, I completely agree, bro. You got to figure it out. You can't bro. China needs a message because China out here trying to flex they muscles, and they trying to test, and they need to be tested. Y'all let me know what y'all think in the comment section. If you guys enjoy, don't forget to subscribe, give the video a thumbs up, check out the next one. See y'all next time.